I had just woken up from brain surgery. My mind was hazy inside the hospital room. Out in the hallway, a 9-year-old boy sat alone with a crayon box, quietly keeping watch over his dying mother. Just as my own son led a stranger into the room to force me to sign papers, the strange boy outside suddenly pressed his palm flat against the window glass, looked straight into my eyes, and mouthed a warning. Don't trust him. Don't sign anything. Thank you for being here with me. Before we continue, drop a comment below and tell me what's the weather like where you are. Your voice truly matters here. Quick note, some details have been adjusted for storytelling purposes. The core message, the lesson about trust and family, is what I hope stays with you. I woke to the smell of fresh paint, trying to cover something antiseptic, and through the window of my hospital room door, a 9-year-old boy I'd never seen before was watching me. My name was Arthur Vance. I was 60 years old. I had spent 35 years as a postal manager at Nashville North USPS, sorting truth from lies in envelopes. But lying in that bed, I couldn't sort out the truth in my own family. The ceiling tiles were white with small holes. I counted them, 42 visible from where I lay. My head felt like it was filled with cotton and someone else's memories. A woman in blue scrubs appeared beside my bed. "You're doing very well, Mr. Vance," she said, checking something on a monitor. "I'm Colleen Price, head nurse on this floor. You're at Crestview Rehabilitation Center in Nashville. Dr. Owens will be visiting this afternoon." Colleen was 45, with kind eyes that had seen too many families fall apart in these rooms. She'd worked Crestview's third floor for 12 years, and she could read family trouble faster than the heart monitor beside my bed could read arrhythmia. I tried to sit up. The room tilted. "Easy," she said. "You've been here 8 days. Brain surgery takes time to heal from." Brain surgery. The words felt foreign. I remembered a car, headlights, nothing after that. "Where's Marlo?" I asked. My voice sounded like gravel. "Where's my wife?" Colleen's expression shifted, not pity exactly, but something close. She touched my arm gently. "Mr. Vance, your records show you're widowed. Your sister Clara was here yesterday. She'll be back tomorrow." The memory hit like cold water. Marlo wasn't away visiting her sister. Marlo wasn't at the grocery store. Marlo had been dead 5 years, cancer, quick and cruel, and I was lying in this bed, trusting my son Julian to handle everything, while my mind couldn't even remember she was gone. Through the door window, the boy was still there. He sat on a plastic chair in the hallway outside room 14. A crayon box, open on his lap, coloring something with the kind of stillness that comes from watching someone you love disappear slowly. "Who's that?" I asked, nodding toward the door. Colleen glanced over. "That's Leo Cooper, 9 years old. He sits there all day so his mother can rest. Grace, his mother, she's in the room across from you, terminal cancer. Leo barely leaves that chair." I watched Leo color. His hand moved carefully, staying inside the lines. He had dark hair that needed cutting, and clothes that had been washed too many times. Every few minutes, he'd look up at his mother's door like he was checking if she was still there. Colleen left to check on another patient. I lay there trying to piece together what was real. 35 years at Nashville North USPS. That was real. Every envelope sorted, but every route checked, every rule followed. They gave me a gold watch when I retired in 2018. Marlo cried at the ceremony. The lake house was real. Percy Priest lakefront property. I bought it in 1989 for $127,000 when interest rates were terrible and everyone said I was crazy. Marlo stood on that empty lot looking at the water and said, "Arthur, this house is proof that you lived right." Now it was worth $850,000. I knew that because Raymond Maxwell, my attorney, had told me when we updated the will. But I couldn't remember what the papers said. Couldn't remember who inherited what. Couldn't remember if I'd protected what needed protecting. What do you call the moment when you realize the person you've trusted most is the person you should have questioned first? I remembered sitting in Raymond's office with oak furniture and law degrees on the wall. I remembered signing papers, but the details floated loose in my head like papers scattered in the wind. The window beside my bed showed December gray sky. Nashville in winter. I've lived here my whole life, knew every street. But lying in room 14B on the third floor of Crestview Rehabilitation Center, I felt like a stranger in my own city. My sister, Clara. Solid practical. Clara had been here yesterday. That meant she knew about the accident, the surgery. But where was Julian? Julian was my son, my only child, 42 years old, lived in Spokane with his second wife. Julian worked in sales, something with investments. He called every few months, sent cards at Christmas, the kind of son who did the minimum required to avoid guilt. I tried to remember the last time we spoke. Couldn't. The surgery had stolen more than just the accident. It had stolen dates, sequences, the order, things happened. Through the door window, Leo had stopped coloring. He was just sitting now, staring at his mother's closed door with the particular stillness of children who've learned that screaming doesn't change anything. I closed my eyes. I tried to think. 35 years of sorting mail teaches you patterns, teaches you what belongs where. But I couldn't sort out my own life. Couldn't remember if I'd told Raymond to leave everything to Julian. Couldn't remember if I'd made provisions for Clara. Couldn't remember anything except Marlowe's voice saying the lake house was proof I'd lived right. Had I lived right? The phone rang. It was Julian. That's when everything started. His voice came through at 10 o'clock that Monday morning, and even through the fog of post-surgical medication, I could hear something in his tone I'd never heard before. Not worry. Not relieved that his father had survived brain surgery. Something that sounded like calculation. "Dad," he said, "I just heard about the accident. I'm so sorry I didn't know sooner. I'm at the airport in Spokane right now. I'll be in Nashville by late afternoon." "You don't have to," I started. "No, I want to be there. We need to talk about some things anyway. Important things. I'll see you soon." He hung up before I could ask what things. Before I could ask why, his voice sounded anxious, not concerned anxious, but urgent anxious. Before I could ask why he was coming at all, when we hadn't spoken more than 10 minutes in the past year, I set the phone down, looked through the door window at Leo Cooper, 9 years old, sitting alone in a hallway with a crayon box and a dying mother. By the time Julian walked through that door 4 hours later, that boy would have already seen what a father couldn't. Julian's call ended at 10. By noon, I was attempting my first 5 steps outside room 14B in 8 days, and the 9-year-old boy with the crayon box looked up and said hello, like we were old friends. The young nurse supporting my elbow was Imogen Holmes, 24, who remembered what it felt like to sit alone in a hospital, waiting for news you were too small to understand. She brought Leo gum and gentle conversation when she passed through the hall. "Slow steps, Mr. Vance," Imogen said. "We're just going to the nurse's station and back." My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Each step required negotiation between brain and muscle. The hallway stretched forever white linoleum, with blue flecks, fluorescent lights humming overhead, the smell of antiseptic and institutional lunch trays. We passed room 14A. Through the partially open door, I heard a woman's voice, tired but steady, reading aloud. "The Velveteen Rabbit," the voice said. "What is real? Does it mean having things that buzz inside you in a stick-out handle?" "That's Leo's mother," Imogen whispered. "Grace Cooper, 35. She used to teach piano to children before she got sick. Now she teaches her son to find truth from a hospital bed he can't see into." Leo was watching us. His crayon box sat closed on his lap now. Up close, he looked even smaller, 9 years old, with eyes that had already learned things children shouldn't know. "Hello, sir," he said. "Are you able to walk already?" "First time," I said. My voice still sounded like gravel. "That's good," Leo said seriously. "Walking is important. My mother can't walk anymore." Imogen's hand tightened on my elbow, steadying herself as much as me. "This boy sits here all day, so his mother can sleep peacefully," Imogen said quietly. "His mother doesn't want him sitting in the room watching her." Leo nodded. "She says I should color and remember happy things. But I like sitting here. I can hear her voice when she reads." We stood there in the hallway, me barely able to stand. Leo, barely able to sit still, both of us learning how to be something we didn't want to be. "Do you have a son?" Leo asked suddenly. "Is your son good?" The question hit like cold water. I want to tell you something about that question, about the way a 9-year-old child can ask something an adult would never dare to say out loud. Leo didn't know he was asking the exact question I'd been avoiding since Julian's phone call 3 hours earlier. He didn't know his simple words would echo in my head for days. "I have a son," I said carefully. "He's coming to visit me today." "That's good," Leo said. But he was watching my face with the particular attention of children who've learned to read truth in pauses and silences. "What makes you ask if he's good?" I said. Leo picked up a blue crayon, turned it over in his small hands. "My mother taught me that some people are good, and some people just pretend to be good. She says when she's not here anymore, I have to figure out which is which by myself." Imogen made a small sound in her throat. Your mother is teaching you something important, I said. Leo nodded and went back to his coloring. Just like that. The conversation was over because he'd said what he needed to say. Imogen helped me back to room 14B. I was exhausted. 5 steps out, 5 steps back, and I felt like I'd run a marathon. I slept for an hour. When I woke, Dr. Desmond Owens was standing at the foot of my bed with a clipboard, and the kind of good news that would become someone else's ticking clock. Dr. Owens was 50, with gray at his temples, and the calm manner of someone who delivered 1,000 diagnoses. He checked my chart, shone a light in my eyes, asked me to follow his finger with my gaze. Excellent, he said. Language reflexes and short-term memory are improving significantly. The swelling has reduced faster than we anticipated. I predict in about 48 hours, when the sedative wears off completely, your consciousness will be almost back to normal. 48 hours, I repeated. Maybe sooner. You're recovering remarkably well for the severity of the injury. There was a knock at the door. Julian walked in wearing a charcoal jacket, and the kind of careful smile that insurance agents practice in mirrors, the smile that says, trust me while the eyes calculate risk. He was 42 years old and looked exactly like he had the last time I'd seen him 2 years ago at Christmas. Dad, he said, crossing to the bed. Thank God you're okay. I got here as fast as I could. Julian, I said, my voice cracked. He turned to Dr. Owens, extending his hand. Thank you, doctor, for taking such good care of my father. It means everything to me. Dr. Owens shook his hand. He's doing very well. As I just told him, we expect significant improvement in the next 48 hours. Julian's smile didn't change, but something behind his eyes did, just for a fraction of a second. Not relief, not joy that his father was recovering ahead of schedule. Calculation, 48 hours. That's all the time I had left before everything my son was planning would either succeed or fail. Dr. Owens left. Julian sat in the chair beside my bed and talked about his flight from Spokane. The traffic from the airport, how worried he'd been when Clara called. His voice was warm. His hand on my arm was gentle. Everything about him said concerned son. But I kept seeing that flash in his eyes when Dr. Owens said 48 hours. I closed my eyes and told myself I was seeing things that my son's face hadn't shown calculation when the doctor gave the timeline that I was paranoid from medication and grief. I told myself that for another 18 hours. By the time I stopped telling myself that lie, my son would already have 3 forged documents in his briefcase and a notary on standby. What I didn't know was that on Monday afternoon at 3 o'clock, while I was convincing myself I'd imagined everything, Julian was already making his first move. I came back from physical therapy at 3 o'clock on Monday afternoon, so tired I could barely keep my eyes open, and my son was sitting in the visitor's chair with a stack of papers thick enough to be a phone book. Julian looked up and smiled. Dad, how was the session? Exhausting, I said. My legs felt like water. Imogen helped me back into bed and left, closing the door quietly behind her. Julian pulled his chair closer. The papers sat on his lap, 50, 60 pages, maybe stapled in sections. I could see words printed at the top, Crestview Rehabilitation Center, and something about financial responsibility. I know you're tired, Julian said. His voice was gentle, concerned. But I need you to sign these papers so the hospital can process the fees and reserve your room. It's just normal administrative procedures. They need them by end of day. He set the stack on the bed beside me. The paper felt heavy, official. My head was swimming from the therapy they'd made me walk the entire hallway twice, and my brain felt like it had been scrubbed with steel wool. What are they? I asked. Hospital forms, fee schedules, insurance coordination room, reservation for continued care. Julian was already flipping to a page with yellow tabs stuck on it. Right here, Dad, and here, just routine signatures. I tried to focus on the words. The letters swam. My eyes wouldn't stay open long enough to read a full sentence. That's when I realized through the fog of medication and exhaustion that Julian had timed this perfectly. He'd waited until I came back from physical therapy. Waited until I was at my most vulnerable. Waited until my mind was too tired to ask questions or read carefully. He knew exactly what he was doing. Julian, I said slowly, can I read these first? Of course, Dad. But there's not much to read. It's standard hospital boilerplate. Look right here. He pointed to a paragraph. His thumb covered the bottom half of the page. It just says you authorize continued rehabilitation treatment and acknowledge the fee structure. His thumb stayed there covering something. I tried to lean forward to see what was underneath, but my head spun. Just sign here, Dad, Julian urged. pressing his thumb firmly over the lower paragraph of the first document while sliding an expensive heavy metal pen into my trembling hand. My head was swimming from the post-surgical medication, making the small print look like moving ants. I could barely hold my eyelids open, let alone comprehend the legal jargon. Every time I tried to shift my gaze downward to see what his hand was hiding, Julian would smoothly turn the page, pointing his finger at another yellow signature tab. Don't worry about the details. It's just routine hospital paperwork. His voice was whispers of velvet, but his grip on the clipboard was tight knuckles turning white as he tracked the slow, shaky movement of my hand. My hand was shaking. I could barely hold the pen steady. I looked at Julian's face. He was watching me with an expression I'd never seen before, patient but underneath it something urgent, waiting. Let me tell you what it's like to hold a pen in your hand and not be able to remember 30 seconds later whether you used it. The medication they had me on after brain surgery did something to short-term memory. Dr. Owens had explained it. You might experience some temporary gaps, he'd said, moments where you're not quite sure what just happened. This was one of those moments. I remember looking at the page. I remember Julian's voice saying, "Right here, Dad." I remember the pen in my hand, heavy as a weapon. I remember trying to focus on the words, but they kept sliding away from me like water. "What does this say?" I asked, pointing at a paragraph. "Standard liability waiver," Julian said smoothly. "Says you won't hold the hospital responsible for normal risks of rehabilitation. Every facility requires it." I tried to read it myself. Got through 3 words before exhaustion pulled my eyes closed. "Dad," Julian said gently, "you're exhausted. Maybe you should rest. We can sign these tomorrow." "Tomorrow," I repeated. The word felt far away. "Yes, let me just—" He started gathering the papers. "Let me put these away for you. You need to sleep." I watched him stack the papers back together. Neat, efficient movements. The pen was still in my hand. Had I used it, I couldn't remember. There was a blank space in my memory where the last 2 minutes should have been. "Julian," I said, "did I sign those?" He looked at me with such concern. "You started to, Dad, but you're too tired. We'll finish tomorrow when you're feeling better. Rest now." He put the papers in his briefcase, clicked it closed, stood up, and kissed my forehead like I was a child. "I'm staying at a hotel nearby," he said. "I'll come back in the morning. Get some sleep." Then he was gone. I lay there staring at the ceiling, tried to remember, tried to piece together the last 5 minutes. But there was nothing, just fragments. Julian's voice, the pen in my hand, pages turning. Had my hand touched paper? Had I signed my name? I couldn't remember. The scariest thing wasn't Julian. It was the blank space in my own memory where the answer should have been. I lay in that hospital bed for an hour after Julian left, trying to clear the fog, entirely unaware that a warning from my past was already waiting close by. At 7 o'clock Monday night, I opened the bedside drawer, looking for my reading glasses, and found a piece of paper folded in half, and the handwriting on it was mine. I didn't remember putting it there, didn't remember writing it, but I recognized the handwriting the way you recognize your own face in a mirror, the hurried scrawl of someone who'd spent 35 years sorting mail fast enough to meet quota. I unfolded it with trembling hands. The paper was from a hospital notepad. My handwriting was shaky worse than usual, but legible. Someone must have given me a pen while I was still conscious before the surgery, before they put me under, before my memory became Swiss cheese. I read it aloud to the empty room. "Julian borrowed $47,000 as of March, not yet repaid. Don't sign anything else without Raymond's permission." The words sat there on cheap paper like a bomb. I read it again and again. The handwriting didn't change. The message didn't change. I had written this note to myself when my mind was still clear, when I could still think straight, when I still remembered everything I needed to protect. I was warning myself. Past me, the version who could still add numbers and remember names and distinguish truth from manipulation had left a message for future me. For the confused, medicated, half-conscious version lying in this hospital bed. Don't sign anything else without Raymond's permission. Else. That meant I'd already signed something. Something involving Julian, and money I didn't have. Money he hadn't repaid since March. March was 9 months ago. I want to tell you what it feels like to receive a warning from yourself, from the version of you who could still think clearly, trying to protect the version who can't. It's like watching a video of yourself screaming at a door you're about to walk through, but you can't hear the sound, can't remember the warning, can only find the note afterward and realize you walked through anyway. Had I signed those papers this afternoon, with Julian sitting beside my bed, his thumb covering the bottom of each page. I folded the note carefully and put it in my pocket. My hands were shaking. I needed water. My mouth was desert dry. I stood up slowly, still unsteady on my feet, and walked out into the hallway. The hospital corridor at 8 p.m. on a Monday was quiet. Most patients were asleep or pretending to be. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped steadily. Leo was sitting in his usual spot outside room 14A, under a small reading lamp someone had set up for him. His crayon box was closed. He wasn't coloring, just sitting there with his hands folded in his lap like a little old man. I walked past him toward the water dispenser at the end of the hall. "Uncle," Leo said softly. I turned. He was looking at me with those serious brown eyes that seemed too old for a 9-year-old face. "Uncle," he said again and gently pulled at my sleeve. I walked over to him, knelt down so I could hear him properly. My knees protested. Leo leaned forward and spoke in a voice that sounded like an adult's calm, measured, careful. "That man, the one who came to visit you this afternoon, he lied to you. I sat out here all afternoon. I saw him cover the letters with his finger and force you to sign." The words hit like ice water. "What?" I said. "The man in the gray jacket," Leo continued. "He brought papers. Big stack. He kept putting his hand over the bottom part so you couldn't read. Then he made you sign. My dad used to do the same thing to my mom." I stared at him. "Your dad?" "My biological dad," Leo corrected. "Not my stepdad. My real dad left when I was 4, but before he left, he did that to my mom. Cover the letters and force her to sign the car sale papers. Then my dad took the money and left." Leo's small face was very serious in the dim lamplight. "My mother taught me that when someone covers their hand over papers, it means they don't want you to read them. She said that's how you know someone is lying, not by their face, but by what they hide with their hands." I couldn't speak. My throat had closed. "I just thought you should know," Leo said quietly, "because you seem like a nice man, and that man seems like my dad. A 9-year-old child sees what a 60-year-old father cannot. That's not wisdom, that's tragedy." I looked at Leo for a long time in that dim hallway. The small boy with the crayon box, and the dying mother, and the old eyes. This child who had no reason to care about me, no reason to warn me, no reason to lie. "Thank you," I said, my voice cracked. "Thank you, Leo." He nodded once, a small, solemn movement, and went back to looking at his mother's door. I walked back to my room slowly, sat on the edge of the bed, looked out the dark window at Nashville lights in the distance. In my pocket was a note in my own handwriting: "Don't sign anything else without Raymond's permission." In my memory was Leo's voice. "He covered the letters with his finger and forced you to sign." In my head, there was only one thought: this 9-year-old boy has no reason to lie to me. My son, the one I'd raised, the one I'd paid 3 debts. For the one who'd just covered papers with his thumb had every reason. What I didn't know was that I wouldn't sleep for the next 6 hours. And by morning, I'd have to choose between 42 years of fatherhood and a stranger's warning written in my own hand. I didn't sleep that Monday night, couldn't sleep. Just lay in the dark, watching the monitor, lights flicker, and holding a piece of paper with my own handwriting telling me not to trust my son. The note was still in my hand at 11 p.m., at midnight. At 1 a.m., the words never changed. "Julian borrowed $47,000 as of March. Not yet repaid. Don't sign anything else without Raymond's permission." I read it so many times the letters started to blur, but the meaning stayed sharp. The monitor beside my bed cast a dim blue glow, enough to read by, not enough to pretend I wasn't alone with a choice I didn't want to make. I tried to remember March, 9 months ago. Had Julian called? Had he asked for money? The surgery had stolen those memories, but I remembered the pattern. I'd seen it before. First time was 15 years ago. Julian was 27. He'd called from Seattle saying he'd made a business investment that went bad, needed $8,000 to cover the loss. I sent it. He swore it was the last time. Second time was 9 years ago. Different city, different wife, same story. $15,000 this time. Investment opportunity that wasn't. Julian's voice on the phone. "This is the last time, Dad. I promise. The last time." Third time was 4 years ago. $24,000. A sure thing that wasn't sure. Julian's words: "I know I said last time, but this really is the last time. I've learned my lesson." I'd chosen to believe him. 3 times. Sent the money. Never asked when it would be paid back. Never pushed. Never said no. That's what fathers do, I'd told myself. That's what love looks like. But then Marlo got sick. Cancer. Fast and brutal. She was in hospice for 3 weeks before she died. 3 weeks of lucid moments between morphine doses. I was sitting beside her bed on a Tuesday afternoon. She'd been quiet for hours. Then she opened her eyes and looked at me with perfect clarity. "Arthur," she said. Her voice was paper thin but steady. "You have to learn to say no to Julian. Marlowe, not because you don't love him, but because you love him." Those were some of the last words she ever said to me. She died 2 days later. I thought about that conversation maybe twice in 5 years. Pushed it away, told myself she was confused from the medication, but lying in that hospital bed at 2 a.m. on Tuesday morning, holding a note I'd written to myself, warning about my own son, I understood exactly what she meant. How many times can you tell yourself the same lie before it stops being a mistake and becomes a choice? Saying yes to Julian, sending money, bailing him out, never asking questions wasn't love. It was enabling. It was teaching him that someone would always catch him, that consequences were negotiable. Marlowe had seen it, had tried to tell me, had died knowing I wouldn't listen. But I was listening now. At 9 o'clock Tuesday morning, I picked up the hospital phone and called Clara. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. "Hi, this is Clara. I can't answer right now. Leave a message." The beep sounded like a door closing. "Clara," I said. "It's me. I'm in the hospital in Nashville. Crestview Rehabilitation. I need to talk to you about some paperwork. It's urgent. Call me as soon as you get this." I hung up, stared at the phone, willed it to ring. It didn't. I tried again at 9:15. Same voicemail, same beep, same silence. Colleen came in at 9:30 to check my vitals. She wrapped the blood pressure cuff around my arm and pumped it tight. 130/85, she said. "Good. You're stabilizing nicely." "Colleen," I said, "do you know when my sister Clara is supposed to visit? I need to talk to her." "I believe she's traveling today, Mr. Vance," Colleen said. "International flight. That's why she couldn't be here this morning." International. That meant time zones. That meant I wouldn't reach her for hours. Maybe all day. Colleen was unwrapping the cuff when she said casually, "Your son called earlier this morning asking what time Dr. Owens would be visiting you today. I told him around 2 p.m. He seemed very interested in the schedule." My stomach dropped. "What time did he call?" I asked. "Around 7:30, before shift change." "Did he say why he wanted to know?" "Just said he wanted to make sure he didn't miss the doctor." Colleen smiled. "It's nice when family stays involved in the care plan." She left, closed the door behind her. I sat there in that bed, feeling my heartbeat in my ears. Julian had called at 7:30 to ask about Dr. Owens' schedule. Not to visit his father, not to check how I was feeling, to find out when the doctor would be here, to calculate his window. Dr. Owens had said 48 hours until my consciousness returned fully. That was yesterday afternoon around 3 p.m., which meant today, Tuesday, around 3 p.m. I'd be thinking clearly again, too clearly to manipulate, too alert to confuse with paperwork and covered pages. Julian wasn't checking to see me. He was checking how much time he had left. That's when I understood my son wasn't visiting. He was hunting. I looked at the note in my hand one more time. Read the words I'd written to myself when my mind was clear. "Don't sign anything else without Raymond's permission." I decided right then, sitting in that hospital bed at 9 o'clock Tuesday morning, that I would not sign anything until I spoke to Clara. It was the simplest decision I'd made in my entire life. Clear as sorted mail. And if I'm being honest with you now, it almost wasn't enough. Because what I didn't know was that Julian had already prepared 3 documents, hired a notary, and would walk through my door in exactly 2 hours with a smile that looked like love and a plan that looked like theft. Julian walked into my room at 11 o'clock Tuesday morning, carrying a stack of documents twice as thick as the one he'd brought the day before. And the first thing I thought was, he's been preparing this for weeks. Not days, weeks, maybe months. "Dad," he said, setting the papers on the rolling table beside my bed, "I'm glad you got some rest. You look better today." I didn't feel better. I felt like someone standing on train tracks watching a light grow bigger in the distance. "I brought the proper paperwork this time," Julian continued. He was wearing a different jacket, navy blue instead of charcoal, but the same practiced smile. "This is a comprehensive financial power of attorney. It's what Dr. Owens and the hospital administrator both said you need, so I can handle the bills and accounts while you recover. It's perfectly normal for patients in rehabilitation." He opened the document to the first page, pointed to a highlighted section. "See right here. It just authorizes me to pay medical bills, coordinate with insurance, handle routine financial matters. Dr. Owens agrees it's standard procedure for anyone recovering from brain surgery." I looked at the words. They swam a little, the medication still made focusing difficult, but I could read them well enough. Julian, I said slowly, I'd like to keep the documents here and read them carefully first. His face stiffened, just for half a second, so fast I might have missed it if I hadn't been looking for exactly that. The smile didn't change, the voice didn't change, but something behind his eyes went very still. Then he recovered. Of course, Dad, of course. The warmth returned instantly. Too instantly. You should absolutely read everything carefully. That's the smart thing to do. Let me put them right here on your bedside table for you. He set the stack down gently, patted it once like it was something precious. I have to make some calls this afternoon, he said, but I'll come back around dinner time to see if you have any questions. Take your time reading. No rush. He kissed my forehead, squeezed my shoulder, left. The door clicked shut behind him. I stared at the document stack for a long time before I picked it up. It was heavy, maybe 40 pages. Professional binding, tabs marking signature lines. Someone had put real work into this. I want you to understand something about reading legal documents when you're 60 years old and someone you raised is trying to take everything you own. Every word matters. Every comma, every whereas, and heretofore, and notwithstanding. You can't skim. You can't trust summaries. You have to read every single sentence like your life depends on it. Because it does. I started at page 1. The first 3 pages were standard language about granting power of attorney to Julian Vance, my son, to act as my agent in financial matters during my incapacity. That part looked normal enough. Page 4 had a section titled Real Property Authority. I read it slowly, out loud, the way I used to read important postal service bulletins. Agent is hereby authorized to sign all real estate transactions on behalf of principal, including but not limited to sales, purchases, transfers, mortgages, liens, and conveyances of any real property owned by principal. I stopped, read it again. Sales, transfers, conveyances. That meant Julian could sell the Percy Priest lakefront house without me signing anything. Could transfer the deed to himself. Could mortgage it. Could do whatever he wanted with property worth $850,000. My hands started shaking. I kept reading. Page 7 had a section titled Insurance and Retirement Benefits. Agent is hereby authorized to change beneficiary designations on all insurance policies, retirement accounts, pension plans, and death benefits owned by or payable to principal. I set the document down on my lap, closed my eyes, breathed. Change beneficiary designations. That meant Julian could make himself the beneficiary on the life insurance policy. $400,000. Could change the retirement account beneficiary. $180,000. This wasn't medical authorization. This wasn't paying hospital bills. This was permission to take everything I owned without me signing another piece of paper. One signature. That's all he needed. One signature and 35 years of honest work would vanish in the time it takes to file a form. I picked up the document again, kept reading. Page 12, authority to open and close bank accounts. Page 15, authority to gift assets to third parties. Page 18, authority to disclaim inheritances on my behalf. Every page was another door Julian could walk through. Another piece of my life he could take. I reached the end. The signature page. 3 lines highlighted in yellow. Principal signature. Date. Witness. If I signed this document, Julian wouldn't need to manipulate me again. Wouldn't need to cover pages with his thumb. Wouldn't need to wait for me to be medicated and exhausted. He'd just need to walk into a bank with this paper and say, my father authorized me to transfer his accounts. Walk into a title company and say, my father authorized me to sell his property. Walk into an insurance office and say, my father authorized me to change the beneficiary to myself. And it would all be legal. All documented, all my own signature at the bottom saying I'd given him permission. I folded the document and laid it on the bedside table. I didn't tear it. I didn't throw it across the room. I just thought he'll come back. And when he comes back, I need to know exactly what I want to say. The problem was I had no idea what that was. What I didn't know was that while I was reading those documents alone in room 14B, a 9-year-old boy in the hallway was about to teach me the difference between blood family and chosen family. I needed to clear my head before Julian came back. So at noon, I went looking for the only person in that building who told me the truth, a 9-year-old boy sitting alone in a hallway. Leo was in his usual spot outside room 14A, crayon box, open. He was coloring something that looked like a house with a tree beside it. I lowered myself into the plastic chair next to him. My legs were stronger today. The physical therapy was working. May I sit? I asked. Leo looked up, nodded, went back to his coloring. We sat in silence for a minute. The hallway was quiet, except for the distant sound of someone's TV and the soft scratch of Leo's crayon on paper. Tell me about your mother, I said. Leo didn't look up from his drawing. My mother's name is Grace. She used to teach piano to children. She's had cancer since last year. There's no one else, just me and her. No other family. No, just us. I watched him color. He was very careful about staying inside the lines, very precise. The kind of child who paid attention to details. What did she teach you? I asked. Besides piano. Leo paused, set down his blue crayon, and picked up a green one. She taught me that when she's no longer here, I'll have to figure out for myself who is truly good to me and who is just pretending. The words hit like a hammer. That's a hard thing to teach a child, I said. She said it's harder not to know. Leo looked at me with those old eyes. She said some people love you because you're useful, and some people love you because they see you. Those are different. I couldn't speak for a moment. Here was a 9-year-old child sitting in a hospital hallway, waiting for his mother to die, and he understood something about love that I'd spent 60 years missing. Are you scared? I finally asked. I'm afraid of being alone, Leo said. But my mother said being afraid of being alone is different from being alone. I don't fully understand that. I understand, I said, and I did. For the first time in days, I understood something clearly. A 9-year-old child sitting in a hospital hallway knows more about love than some men learn in a lifetime. I sat with Leo for another 20 minutes. We didn't talk, just sat there while he colored, and I thought about what Grace had taught him. About truly good versus just pretending. About love that sees you versus love that uses you. When I stood up to go back to my room, Leo looked up. Your son is pretending, he said quietly. I know, I said. Julian found me at 2 o'clock. I was sitting in my room looking out the window when he knocked, poked his head in. Dad, can we talk for a minute? Maybe get some coffee in the cafeteria? All right. He helped me into the wheelchair. I could walk, but not far yet, and pushed me down to the first floor cafeteria. It was between meal times, nearly empty. Just us and an elderly couple in the far corner. Julian got 2 coffees from the dispenser. Black for him, black for me. Set them on a white plastic table in the quietest corner. Then he sat down and placed his hands flat on the table, palms down, the body language of someone taking control. Dad, he said. No smile now, no warmth, just the tone of someone closing a business deal. I'm being foreclosed on by creditors. They have your address. They can come there. I need you to understand the situation. I wrapped my hands around the coffee cup. It was warm, grounding. What situation? I asked. I need you to sign the house by the lake over to my name so I can mortgage it. You won't lose the house. You'll just be letting me borrow against it. I will pay it back in 6 months, but I need it now. There it was. Not the financial power of attorney covering everything. Just the one asset Julian knew would hurt most. The Percy Priest property. The house Marlowe had stood on as an empty lot and said, "This is proof you lived right." The creditors, I said slowly. Why do they have my address? Because I listed you as a reference. Julian's voice was flat, matter of fact. Because I've had to list you for years, because I haven't had stable credit. So when they foreclose, they can come to you. They can garnish your accounts. They can put liens on your property. Unless I handle this first. That's when I understood this wasn't my son asking. This was a stranger demanding. You're threatening me, I said. I'm protecting you. Julian leaned forward. Dad, this is simple. You sign the house over to me temporarily. I mortgage it, pay off the creditors. No one comes after you. In 6 months, I refinance and sign it back. You lose nothing. Except I lose the house if you don't pay. I'll pay. You've said that before. Julian's jaw tightened. This is different. How? Because this time, if I don't pay you, lose everything. That should motivate me. I looked at Julian, sitting across that white plastic cafeteria table. My son, 42 years old, the child I'd raised, the man I'd bailed out 3 times, the person who was now using my love, using 32 years of enabling and excuse-making to threaten me. Let me think, I said. Julian's expression hardened. Tonight, Dad, I need an answer tonight. They're foreclosing tomorrow. If you don't sign, the creditors will come to your address. They'll take everything anyway. At least this way you have a chance of keeping it. He stood up, pushed his untouched coffee across the table toward me. I'll come back at 8 tonight, he said. That gives you 6 hours to think. I'm staying at the Marriott if you need to call. Then he left. I sat there alone in that empty cafeteria, holding 2 cups of cold black coffee, and thinking I've spoiled him for 32 years. I've paid his debts 3 times, each time he promised it was the last. And now he's using those 32 years, using my love to threaten me. What Julian didn't know was that while he was giving me that deadline, I was already planning my first call. I got back to room 14B at 3:30, and the first thing I did was look at the clock on the wall and realize I had 30 minutes before something I didn't understand was going to happen. The first call was to Raymond Maxwell. I pulled out the business card he'd given me last year when we updated the will. His office number. I dialed with shaking fingers. The phone rang 4 times. You've reached the law office of Raymond Maxwell. I'm currently unavailable. Please leave a detailed message, and I'll return your call as soon as possible. Beep! Raymond, this is Arthur Vance. I'm in Crestview Rehabilitation in Nashville. This is urgent. My son Julian is trying to get me to sign documents transferring my property. Don't sign any papers relating to my estate if Julian contacts you. Call me back as soon as you get this. I hung up, stared at the phone, tried Clara again. The phone rang once, twice, then disconnected. No voicemail, just silence. I set the phone down and put my head in my hands. Colleen came in at 3:40 for the afternoon vitals check. She wrapped the blood pressure cuff around my arm in the efficient way nurses do after thousands of repetitions. 140/90, she said, making a note on her tablet. A bit elevated. Are you feeling anxious about something, Mr. Vance? When's the notary coming? I asked. Colleen looked up from her tablet. Oh, the notary. Your son scheduled that appointment for 4 p.m. today. Should be here any minute. He said you needed to sign some medical authorization forms. My stomach dropped. When did he schedule it? I asked carefully. Let me check. She tapped her tablet. Looks like last Friday, 5 days ago. 5 days ago, I was in surgery. 5 days ago, I didn't know my own name. Julian didn't plan this today in desperation. He didn't plan it yesterday after I asked to read the documents. He planned it before I even woke up. He'd been preparing this for days, maybe weeks. The documents, the notary, the timing, all of it calculated down to the hour. Thank you, Colleen, I managed. She left. The door clicked shut. 4 o'clock. The notary was already on the way. I was alone. I picked up the document stack from the bedside table. 40 pages. Professional binding. I had maybe 20 minutes. I started reading again, this time looking for what I'd missed. Page 1 through 3, financial power of attorney. I'd seen that. Page 4 through 8, real property authority granting Julian power to sign all real estate transactions. I'd seen that too. Then page 9, different paper, different font. A document I'd somehow skipped the first time. Quitclaim deed. I read it slowly. For valuable consideration, Arthur Vance hereby transfers all right, title, and interest in property. Located at 2847 Percy Priest Lake Road, Nashville, Tennessee, to Julian Arthur Vance, outright, and in full, effective immediately upon execution. Outright and in full. Not mortgage to borrow against the way Julian had said in the cafeteria. Not temporary. Not sign it back in 6 months. Complete transfer. $850,000 worth of lakefront property. The house Marlowe and I had built together. Given to Julian. Forever. I kept reading. Page 15 was another insert. Different paper again. Beneficiary change form life insurance policy. My life insurance. $400,000. I scanned down to the relevant section. Previous beneficiary Clara Marie Vance. My daughter's name. Her full legal name. Right there in small print. Crossed out. A single typewriter line through it. The old-fashioned kind. The kind that leaves faded ink impressions in the paper. New beneficiary Julian Arthur Vance. I read it again. Previous beneficiary Clara Marie Vance. Julian wasn't just stealing from me. He was stealing from his sister. Taking $400,000 that I designated for Clara and transferring it to himself. And he needed me to sign it. Needed my signature at the bottom saying I authorized the change. Clara Marie Vance. I'd held her the day she was born, and now I was holding the paper that would take her inheritance. I read her name a third time. The letters didn't change. The crossed out line didn't disappear. If I signed these documents, Julian would get the Percy Priest lakefront house, $850,000. Complete control over my bank accounts through the financial power of attorney. My life insurance policy, $400,000. My retirement savings. He could change those beneficiaries too under the POA. Everything. And Clara would get nothing. I set the papers down on the table with hands that weren't shaking anymore. Wasn't angry anymore either. Anger requires surprise. This was something colder. This was calculation meeting calculation. I folded the document carefully along the original crease and set it on the bedside table. Then I heard the elevator at the end of the hallway open with a soft ding. The notary was here, and I had about 60 seconds to decide what kind of father I was going to be. I stood at the door window and watched the elevator open at 3:55, 5 minutes early, and a woman in a brown blazer with a leather briefcase stepped out, and my son was already waiting there to greet her. Julian had been standing at the elevator, waiting, not checking his phone, not pacing, just standing there in position like an actor who knows his mark. The woman was professional, mid-40s maybe, carried a clipboard in one hand and the briefcase in the other. Sarah Caldwell, 42, carried a notary seal and that brown leather briefcase and had notarized 1,000 documents without a second thought until she walked into room 14B and a 60-year-old man asked her whose side she was on. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Julian greeted her with a warm handshake, a slight bow, the body language of gratitude and respect. I watched him gesture toward my room, say something I couldn't hear through the glass. Sarah nodded, reviewed her clipboard, looked professional, efficient, like someone who did this 20 times a week. I scanned the hallway. Leo was sitting in his usual spot outside room 14A. Plastic chair, reading lamp, crayon box, closed on his lap. He was looking directly at me. Our eyes met through the glass window. Leo slowly, deliberately shook his head. Number. Then he did something I didn't expect. He stood up from the plastic chair, walked the 4 steps to my door, and pressed his palm flat against the glass. When I held his gaze, he mouthed 3 words slowly and carefully so I couldn't misread them. Drive. Home. Tonight. The same words as before. The same calm certainty. A 9-year-old boy repeating a warning because he understood better than I did that some truths need saying twice. Just like Monday night when he'd warned me about Julian covering the papers. Just like that. A 9-year-old child I barely knew was watching my son bring a notary to my room and warning me not to trust what was about to happen. That's twice now. Leo had warned me twice. I want you to understand what it means when a 9-year-old child you barely know protects you better than the son you raised. It means something broke a long time ago and you didn't notice. It means you chose not to see. It means every time you said yes when you should have said no, you were building this exact moment. Your son bringing a stranger to steal from you while a dying woman's child tries to save you. Julian and Sarah started walking toward my room. I stepped back from the window, sat on the edge of the bed, placed my hands on my knees to stop them from shaking. The door opened. Dad, Julian said with that warm smile. This is Sarah Caldwell, the notary I told you about. Sarah, this is my father. Sarah stepped in, extending her hand. Mr. Vance, pleased to meet you. I understand we have some documents to notarize today. I shook her hand. It was firm, professional. Please sit, I said. She looked around. There was only one chair, the visitor's chair Julian had been using. Julian stayed standing by the door. Sarah placed her briefcase on the chair and her clipboard on the bedside tray table. This should only take a few minutes, she said in the practiced tone of someone who'd said this 1,000 times. I'm here to notarize medical and administrative authorization procedures. I'll need to verify your identity and ensure you understand the content of the documents before signing. I want to see each page one by one, I said. Julian shifted by the door. Dad, Sarah is busy. We've already gone over these. Let's do this quickly so she can get to her next appointment. I didn't look at Julian, kept my eyes on Sarah. Are you notarizing for me or for my son? The room went still. Sarah stopped mid-reach for her briefcase. Looked at me. Looked at Julian. Looked back at her clipboard. I'm sorry, she said. Simple question, I said. Whose interests are you here to serve, mine or his? Sarah's professional expression flickered. Just for a second. The kind of pause that happens when someone hears a question they've never been asked before. I'm a neutral third party, she said carefully. I'm here to verify identity and witness signatures. I don't serve either party's interests specifically. Julian took a step forward. Dad, that's not Sarah, is just doing her job. She doesn't take sides. I still wasn't looking at him. Then let me read the documents, I said to Sarah. Slowly, each page, before I sign anything. Sarah glanced at Julian. He gave a small nod, too small, too quick. Like they'd planned something and this wasn't part of it. One question. That's all it took to make her pause. Sarah opened her briefcase and pulled out the document stack. Set it in front of me. It was the same 40-page stack from Julian's briefcase. Same tabs, same highlighted sections. Mr. Vance, she said, I need you to confirm that you understand and agree with the content of... I haven't finished reading, I said. Let me read. The room was so quiet I could hear the oxygen concentrator clicking in the room across the hall. Could hear Julian's breathing by the door. Could hear Sarah's pen tapping against her clipboard, a nervous tick she probably didn't know she had. Sarah looked at me, then at Julian, then back at her clipboard. What Sarah didn't know was that she was about to recognize my name from a conversation she'd had 3 years ago. I started reading this first page at 4:20 on Tuesday afternoon, and I read it so slowly that I could feel Julian's impatience radiating across the hospital bed like heat. First paragraph, second paragraph, each word deliberate. Julian shifted his weight by the door, crossed his arms, uncrossed them, checked his watch. Sarah stood beside the bed, holding her clipboard. Professional, patient. But I saw her glance at Julian, then back at the documents. I kept reading. Page 2, page 3. The room was so quiet I could hear the wall clock ticking. Could hear Julian breathing shallow, controlled, like someone trying not to show frustration. I read page 4, word by word. Let me tell you what happens when you read a legal document slowly enough that the person trying to defraud you starts sweating. Every second stretches. Every pause becomes a question. Every time you stop to reread a clause, their entire plan hangs in the air, waiting to either succeed or collapse. Page 5. Sarah glanced down at the document header while I was reading. I saw her eyes focus on something. Her expression changed just slightly. The professional mask flickered. She whispered almost to herself, Arthur Vance, Nashville North Post Office. I looked up. I worked there for 35 years, I said. Sarah's clipboard lowered a fraction. My friend's father, he used to work with you. Patricia Morgan. She talks about you sometimes. Says you're the most honest person her father ever worked with. I could see Julian's hands tighten into fists by the door. That's very kind, I said. Patricia is great. How is she? She's good. She's... Sarah stopped, looked at the document in front of me, then at Julian, then back at me. The professional mask cracked completely. Sarah, Julian said, his voice sharp. Let's get down to business. We're wasting time. Sarah didn't respond to him. She was looking at the document header again, at my name, at the Percy Priest Lake property address listed on page 9. I saw the exact moment she understood. One name. That's all it took for a stranger to become an ally. Would you like to call Patricia? I asked calmly. I haven't talked to her in a few years. It would be nice to catch up. Julian took a step forward. Dad, now is not the time for small talk. I ignored him, kept looking at Sarah. Actually, Sarah said slowly, I should probably review these documents more carefully before we proceed. You've already reviewed them, Julian said. His voice was tight now, desperate. We went over everything before we came here. I reviewed a summary, Sarah said. She was still looking at me. Not the full documents. Julian's hands were shaking now, barely visible, but I saw it. Actually, Sarah said slowly, I must ensure you understand what you are executing, Mr. Vance. Do you know what these documents authorize? I am reading them now, Sarah, I said, pointing directly at the text. This is a complete property transfer of my lake house, and this page changes my life insurance beneficiaries entirely. I never requested any of this. Sarah looked at Julian, her professional mask cracking. Mr. Vance, as a notary public, I am required to ensure you are signing of your own free will. Since you state this is unauthorized, I cannot witness this signature. I am leaving. Yes, I said. Did you request these changes? No, I said. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Julian took another step forward. Dad, you're confused. We discussed this. You agreed that I should handle everything while you recover. I never agreed to transfer my house to you, I said. I never agreed to remove my daughter from my life insurance. Sarah was looking at Julian now with an expression I recognized, the same expression Dr. Owens had when he delivered bad news. The expression of someone who knows exactly what's happening and doesn't like it. Mr. Vance, Sarah said carefully, in my capacity as a notary public, I'm required to ensure that you are signing these documents of your own free will and that you understand their content. Do you want to sign these documents? No, I said. Julian's face went white, then red. Dad, you don't understand what you're doing. The creditors, they're going to come after you. They have your address. If you don't sign this, you're going to lose everything anyway. Then I'll lose it, I said, but I won't give it to you. Sarah closed her clipboard. I can't notarize these documents, she said. Sarah, you're contracted, Julian started. I'm contracted to notarize legitimate transactions, Sarah said. Her voice was firm now, professional again. Not to witness what appears to be elder financial exploitation. I'm sorry. I'm leaving. She picked up her briefcase. Julian stepped in front of the door. You can't just leave. Move, Sarah said. They stared at each other for 3 seconds. Then Julian moved. Sarah walked out. The door closed behind her. Julian and I were alone. He stood there by the door, looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not frustration. Something colder. Calculation without the mask. Dad, he said quietly, now is not the time for small talk. Let's sign these documents. I looked at my son standing there with his hands starting to shake. I looked at the documents Sarah Caldwell had refused to notarize. Then I reached into my hospital gown pocket and took out my phone. What Julian didn't know was that my daughter Clara had been trying to call me back for the last 20 minutes, and her number was right there on my screen. Oh, on hoy. Dad, hang up, Julian said. It rang twice. Clara. Vance, 28, worked in refugee camps across 3 continents, and answered her father's call from an airport in Jordan. Within 2 rings, her voice carrying the kind of urgency that comes from knowing exactly when someone you love is in danger. Dad, her voice was tense, tight. Are you okay? Clara, I said clearly, making sure the speaker was loud enough for everyone to hear. I have a question for you. Do you agree to have your name removed from my $400,000 life insurance policy? 3 seconds of silence. I could hear airport announcements in the background. Could hear Clara breathing. What did you say? Her voice had gone cold. No, absolutely never. Dad, don't sign anything. Do you hear me? Don't sign anything. I'll be right there. Clara, you're misunderstanding, Julian started. Julian, Clara said. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. I know what you're doing. You called me this morning at 6 a.m., demanding I sign a renouncement document, giving up all claims to Dad's estate. You said it was routine paperwork. You said I needed to sign it immediately. Julian's face went white. I recorded the call, Clara said. I want you to understand what it sounds like when your daughter says, I recorded the call, and your son realizes his entire plan just collapsed. It sounds like silence. The kind of silence that happens when every lie someone has told suddenly has a witness. Julian started. I recorded it, Clara said again. All 23 minutes. You explaining that Dad was confused from medication. You explaining that I needed to sign immediately before Dad made bad decisions. You explaining that the life insurance change was just routine estate planning. That's not. I'm boarding my flight in 10 minutes, Clara said. I'll be there in 18 hours. Dad, do not sign anything. I love you. I love you too, I said. The line went dead. The room was so quiet, I could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Julian stood by the door. His hands were shaking, not the slight tremor from earlier, full shaking. Then he exploded. He grabbed the document folder from the bedside table and threw it. Not at Sarah. At me. The papers scattered across the floor, across the bed, some landing on my lap. You've always loved Clara more than me, he said. His voice was raw. No more calculation. No more careful insurance agent smile. Just rage. You've never trusted me. Everything I do, everything you think badly of me. I try to help, and you call it manipulation. I try to protect you, and you call it theft. No, I said softly. I've trusted you too much. That's the problem. Julian stared at me. I've trusted you when I shouldn't have, I continued. I've said yes when I should have said no. I've paid your debts 3 times, and each time you promised it was the last. I've enabled you for 32 years. That's not trust. That's not love. That's me being too afraid to be a real father. A real father would help his son, Julian said. A real father would have said no the first time, I said. Before you learned that asking was the same as receiving. Before you learned that my love meant I'd always catch you. Marlo tried to tell me. She died trying to tell me. And I didn't listen. Julian looked at me with eyes that showed raw anger instead of calculation. No longer performing. No longer selling. Just furious. I needed this, he said quietly. I know, I said. The creditors are your problem, not mine. We looked at each other across that hospital bed. Father and son. 60 years and 42 years. 35 years of honest work and 32 years of enabling. Then Julian grabbed his suitcase from beside the visitor's chair. He didn't say goodbye, didn't say anything, just walked to the door, pushed past Sarah Caldwell, who stepped aside without a word, and left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. 32 years of fatherhood walked out that door, and I let it go. Sarah stood there holding her briefcase and clipboard. She was looking at the floor where the documents lay, scattered, the quitclaim deed, the financial power of attorney, the beneficiary change form with Clara's name crossed out. The room was so quiet after Julian left that I could hear the oxygen concentrator clicking in Grace Cooper's room across the hall. I could hear my own breathing, could hear Sarah's. Sarah Caldwell looked down at her clipboard, then at the floor where the documents lay scattered. She didn't pick them up. What Sarah did next would tell me everything I needed to know about whether I'd chosen the right side. Sarah Caldwell picked up her clipboard and briefcase in the silence that followed my son walking out, and I realized that winning something can feel exactly like losing everything. She straightened her blazer, looked at me, not with pity, something else. Respect, maybe. Mr. Vance, she said, if you need me to provide a statement about anything that happened here today, please contact me. I have your information from the documents. Thank you, I said. She nodded once and left. The door closed with a soft click. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the scattered documents on the floor. The quitclaim deed, the financial power of attorney, the beneficiary change form with Clara's name crossed out. I didn't pick them up, just looked at them like evidence of something broken that couldn't be fixed. The clock on the wall said 4:47 p.m. I'd been awake for 9 days. My head hurt, my body hurt, but those weren't the kind of hurt that mattered. I sat there for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 5 minutes. Then I heard a small voice from the doorway. Uncle! Leo was standing there in the hall, crayon box under his arm, looking at me with those serious brown eyes. Did he leave, Uncle? Leo asked. Yes, I said. He left. Leo nodded, stepped into the room, looked at the papers on the floor, looked back at me. Are you all right? He asked. A 9-year-old child asking if I was all right. A stranger's child asked if I was all right, and my own son didn't. I'm fine, I said, and I meant it. Thank you for telling me last night about what you saw, about your mother's lesson. Leo nodded solemnly. My mother says the truth is the only thing that never changes. Everything else can lie, but the truth just sits there being true. Your mother is very wise, I said. She's sleeping now, Leo said. The nurse said she needs lots of rest. He stood there for another moment. Then he said, I'm glad you're all right, Uncle. I'll go back to my chair now. And he left, just like that. Simple kindness from a child who had every reason to focus on his own problems and none to care about mine. I sat there in the quiet room and cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears for everything that had happened and everything that couldn't be undone. I cried for Julian, for Marlowe, for 35 years of honest work almost stolen by the person I'd raised, for Leo sitting alone in a hallway, for Grace dying across the hall. I cried until there was nothing left to cry. Then I went to sleep. When I woke up, it was Wednesday morning, and Clara was standing beside my bed. She was still in her travel clothes, jeans and a jacket that smelled like airports and recycled air. Her hair was tied back. Her eyes were red. Dad, she said and threw her arms around me. She was crying. I held her and let her cry. Could feel her shoulders shaking. I got here as fast as I could, she said into my shoulder. 18 hours, 3 flights. I was so scared I'd be too late. You're not too late, I said. I should have been here, she said. I should have known Julian would try something. I should have. You couldn't have known, I said. I didn't know. She pulled back, wiped her eyes, looked at me with Marlowe's expression fierce and protective and full of love. There was a knock at the door. Dr. Desmond Owens came in carrying his clipboard and wearing the expression of someone bringing good news for once. Mr. Vance, he said, I have your latest neurological assessment results. And I said, your consciousness has recovered remarkably well, much faster than we anticipated. Language function, memory reasoning, all showing significant improvement. We'll be able to discharge you sooner than originally planned. Clara grabbed my hand. That's wonderful, she said. It is, Dr. Owens said. Then he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Sometimes releasing a psychological burden helps the brain recover faster than any medication can. Stress, fear, anxiety, they all slow healing. When those are removed, the body does remarkable things. He meant Julian, meant the confrontation, meant choosing truth over enabling. My brain had recovered because I'd finally said no. I want you to know that sometimes the hardest victories are the ones where you don't feel like celebrating. Thank you, doctor, I said. Dr. Owens left. Clara and I sat in silence for a moment. Then she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out her phone, set it on the bedside table. On the screen was an audio file labeled Julian, Tuesday 9 a.m. Dad, she said quietly, do you want to hear it? The recording from yesterday morning? I looked at the phone, at the audio file, at 23 minutes of my son trying to manipulate my daughter into signing away her inheritance. I looked at Clara's face, at the tears still wet on her cheeks, at the exhaustion and relief and anger all mixed together. I looked at the doorway where Leo had stood, asking if I was all right. Later, Clara, I said. Right now, I want to ask you something. I told her about Leo. What I didn't know was that in 18 hours, Leo's mother Grace would take her last breath, and I'd have to make the fastest decision of my life. Clara picked up my iPad Wednesday afternoon to check her flight confirmation home, and what she found instead was an email my son had sent to someone I'd never heard of about how to steal everything I owned. Dad, she said, her voice had gone very quiet. Your iPad is still syncing with the old family email account. I didn't know that, I said. There's an email here. She was staring at the screen. From Julian, sent last week to someone called rl.associates@gmail.com. I sat up straighter in the bed. Clara's fingers moved across the screen. Opening the email, reading, her face went white. Clara, I said, what does it say? She looked at me, then back at the iPad. Then she started reading aloud. The plan as agreed. Cabin plus POA plus insurance. Total approximately $1.43 million. After selling cabin and withdrawing insurance, your share is $180,000 as agreed. She stopped, looked at me. Keep reading, I said. Dolores Evans is silent. She has no proof. The words hung in the air. Clara set the iPad down on the bedside table like it was something dangerous. Julian had an accomplice, she said. Someone was helping him. Someone who was going to get... She looked at the screen again. $180,000 for helping him steal from you. I couldn't speak. Dad, Claire said, this wasn't just Julian being desperate. This was organized, planned. He had a partner. I thought about the documents, the professional binding, the tabs marking signature lines, the timing calculated down to the hour, the notary scheduled 5 days in advance. Of course he'd had help. Who is RL Associates? Clara asked. I don't know, I said. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I asked the question that was burning in my head. Who is Dolores Evans? Dolores Evans. A name I'd never heard. A woman my son had already destroyed. Clara picked up the iPad again, started searching. I watched her face as she typed. There's a Dolores Evans in Florida, she said. Clearwater. She posted on a seniors forum 2 years ago asking for advice about elder fraud. Said her father was scammed, but they couldn't prove it because the documents were destroyed. 2 years ago, before me. Julian had done this before. How much? I asked. She doesn't say, but she mentions... Claire's voice cracked. She mentions a son-in-law named Julian. The room was very quiet. He's done this before, Claire said. Dad, he's done this to other people. And this Dolores Evans person, she had no proof. Just like you would have had no proof if you'd signed those documents. I looked at my daughter, at the tears in her eyes, at the iPad showing me evidence of my son's systematic fraud. We need to call Raymond, I said, before I show you what my attorney revealed when he arrived. Comment, A, if I should report Julian to police, or B, if I should let him go. Add one short reason. Please note what follows contains recreated details for storytelling purposes, but the lesson about family and trust is what I hope stays with you. Raymond Maxwell arrived at Crestview an hour later, carrying his leather briefcase and the expression of someone who'd been expecting this call. We met in a small meeting room on the first floor, Clara, Raymond, and me. Raymond set his briefcase on the table and pulled out a document. This is your will, he said. The real one. The one we drafted together 2 years ago when you retired. He opened it to the first page. Let me read you the relevant sections, he said. Percy Priest, lakefront property to be sold upon your death, proceeds divided equally between Clara Marie Vance and Julian Arthur Vance. 50-50 split. Clara was gripping my hand under the table. Life insurance policy, $400,000. Clara Marie Vance, sole beneficiary. I heard Clara's breath catch. Retirement savings, $180,000 divided into 3 equal portions. 1/3 to Clara Marie Vance, 1/3 to Julian Arthur Vance, 1/3 to fund a vocational training scholarship at the institution where you once taught postal service management. Raymond looked up at me. The documents Julian brought you would have overturned almost every one of these provisions. He would have received the entire estate. Clara would have received nothing. The scholarship would have ceased to exist. Do you know what saved you? I thought about the handwritten note I'd written to myself before surgery. About Leo sitting in the hallway warning me twice. About Sarah Caldwell recognizing my name. A 9-year-old child in my own handwriting, I said. My own handwriting warning me, and a child's honesty saving me. That's what family really looks like. Raymond nodded slowly. Then he looked at me across that small meeting room table. Arthur, he said, what do you want to do next about Julian? I didn't answer right away. I thought of the 9-year-old boy sitting in the hallway whose mother was dying. I thought of a woman named Dolores Evans I'd never met who had no proof. I thought about what stopping one more person from being destroyed might cost. I thought about Julian's face when he'd thrown those documents at me, the raw anger, the calculation underneath. I thought about Marlowe's dying words. You have to learn to say no to Julian, not because you don't love him, but because you love him. What I didn't know was that in 6 hours, a nurse would knock on my door at midnight with news that would make that decision for me. The 6 hours came at midnight when I couldn't sleep and walked into the hallway to find Nurse Colleen coming toward me with the expression healthcare workers wear when they're carrying bad news. She was mid-40s with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a bun, the kind of person whose face had learned to deliver terminal timelines gently. She found me pacing outside my room and spoke in a hushed tone. Mr. Vance, she whispered, I thought you should know Grace Cooper in 309 isn't doing well tonight. Doctor says maybe 1 or 2 days left. I looked down the hallway. Leo sat on a plastic chair near the window, not coloring, not reading, just sitting in the dark, staring out at nothing. Thank you for telling me, I said. Colleen nodded and continued her rounds. I walked down the hallway and sat in the chair beside Leo. Didn't say anything. He didn't look at me. We just sat there in the darkness together while the hospital hummed around us. Distant monitor beeps from other rooms. Soft squeak of nurse shoes on linoleum. The heating system clicking on with a warm air whoosh. Ice machine down the hall grinding cubes. I noticed these sounds more acutely in the dark, the soundtrack of people fighting to stay alive while others sat vigil, waiting for the end. After maybe 10 minutes, Leo spoke. She's going to die, he said. Not a question, just a fact stated quietly in the darkness. I know, I said. We sat together another few minutes. Then Leo stood and walked back to his mother's room. I watched him go, a 9-year-old boy about to lose everything. That's when I understood what Julian's theft really meant. Not just numbers on documents or property lines on a deed. Families destroyed, children left alone, people like Dolores Evans in Florida with no proof and no recourse. If I did nothing, there would be another victim, another family torn apart, another child sitting in a dark hallway watching someone they love die while a predator calculated how to steal what remained. I walked back to room 14B carrying the weight of what I'd witnessed. I retrieved the handwritten note from my bedside table, the one I'd written to myself before surgery. My own warnings about Julian Vance felt different now, more urgent. I thought through the evidence, Julian's email to RL Associates, laying out the fraud plan, the accomplices cut. Dolores Evans mentioned by name she has no proof. The documents with crossed out names and professional binding. Marlowe's dying words about learning to say no. Sarah Caldwell recognizing my signature wasn't my signature. Leo's warnings delivered twice because he knew something was wrong. I had enough to trigger a police investigation. Maybe not enough to guarantee prosecution, but enough to stop the pattern. My head throbbed dull ache behind my left temple. Remnant of the surgery or stress or both. I pressed my fingers to the spot and felt my pulse there. 5 days ago I woke up and didn't know my own name. Now I was deciding whether to destroy my son's life to save strangers I'd never met. Recovery isn't just physical, it's relearning who you are when everything's been stripped away. At 2:47 in the morning, I picked up my phone and texted Raymond. Provide everything to police tomorrow morning. The documents, the iPad email, the timeline. Contact Dolores Evans in Florida. She'll corroborate the pattern. File formal complaint. Julian can't do this to anyone else. I stared at the message for 30 seconds before sending it. Once I pressed send, there was no taking it back. 4 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Understood. I'll contact detective in morning and reach out to Evans. You're doing the right thing. Raymond's confirmation sat on the screen. Validation, but also finality. I was reporting a family member, son's life. There would be a legal battle. Possible retaliation. Julian would know I'd chosen strangers over him, but I wasn't choosing strangers over family. I was choosing to stop a predator before he found his next victim. I wasn't just protecting my assets anymore. I was protecting the next Dolores Evans, the next vulnerable person Julian would target when he ran out of money again. The decision settled into my chest with a weight that felt both heavy and right. I fell into uneasy sleep around 3:30 in the morning. Dreams filled with legal documents and children sitting alone in dark hallways, and Julian's face when he'd thrown those papers at me. The knock came at 5 o'clock. I opened my eyes disoriented. The room was still dark, Someone was knocking on my door. I climbed out of bed and opened it. Colleen stood in the hallway. Her face told me everything before she said a word. "Mr. Vance," she said softly, "Grace Cooper passed away at 4:17 this morning. I thought you'd want to know, given your time with Leo." The air went out of my lungs. "Where is he?" I asked. Colleen gestured down the hallway. I stepped out of my room. The hallway lights were dim. Early morning, too early for most people to be awake. Leo sat on the plastic chair outside room 309, hands folded in his lap, staring at his mother's closed door. No grandmother, no social worker, just a 9-year-old boy who'd just lost his mother, sitting alone in a hospital hallway at 5 in the morning. I'd made the choice to save strangers from Julian. I'd set the wheels in motion to stop the next victim. But I couldn't save the boy next door from losing everything. Grace died at 4:17 while I slept. 90 minutes after I'd finally made my decision. 90 minutes after I'd chosen to protect people I'd never met. And now Leo sat alone outside his mother's door with nothing left to protect. I opened the door at 5 in the morning to nurse Colleen's soft knock, and the sight of Leo Cooper sitting perfectly still in that plastic chair outside room 309, hands folded in his lap, staring at his mother's closed door like he was waiting for her to come back out. "She went peacefully at 4:17, Colleen said quietly. "Social worker will be here around 8 to arrange for the boy." Arrange for the boy, like Leo was furniture that needed moving. I walked down the hallway and sat in the chair beside him, the same chairs we'd sat in at midnight when his mother was still alive. The plastic was cold through my hospital gown. We didn't speak for a long time, just sat there as the hospital woke up around us. Breakfast carts rattling down corridors. Day shift nurses arriving with coffee cups and tired smiles. Morning light starting to creep through the windows at the end of the hall. Finally, Leo turned to look at me. "Do you know the orphanage?" he asked. His voice was very small. My mother said I might have to go there. I looked at this 9-year-old boy who'd saved my life, who'd sat in hallways so his dying mother could sleep, who'd warned me twice about documents that would have destroyed everything, who'd told me the truth with no reason to, except that lying felt wrong. I thought about Julian, about the email to his accomplice, about Dolores Evans in Florida with no proof, about the text I'd sent Raymond at 2:47 this morning, setting the wheels of justice in motion. I was fighting to stop Julian from stealing from vulnerable people. And here sat the most vulnerable person I'd ever met. "I know a better place," I said. Leo looked at me with those serious brown eyes. "Where?" he asked. "With me," I said, "if you want." The words came out before I'd fully thought them through. But once they were spoken, I knew they were right. Leo studied my face for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "Okay," he said, just like that. "Okay." Like I'd offered him a sandwich instead of a completely different life. 5 days ago, I didn't know my own name. Now I was offering to raise a stranger's child. Recovery means relearning who you are. Sometimes you become someone better than you were before. At 9 o'clock Thursday morning, we gathered in the small meeting room where Raymond had read me my real will the day before. Clara had driven straight through the night from the airport. Her eyes were red from crying and exhaustion, but she was there. Raymond Maxwell sat at the table with his leather briefcase open and documents spread across the surface. He looked tired, too. None of us had slept much. "The handwritten note," Raymond said, holding up the paper I'd written to myself before surgery. "Written while you were fully conscious pre-surgery with your signature and date. It's legally valid." "What does it say about guardianship?" I asked. Raymond read aloud. "If something happens to me and Grace Cooper's son needs help, I want Clara to know I'd take him in." I'd written that 5 days ago, before I met Leo. Before I knew anything except that a 9-year-old boy was trying to warn me and his mother was dying. Some part of me had already known what needed to happen. "I'm proposing temporary guardianship," I said, "for Leo, with Clara as co-guardian initially given my health status." Raymond looked at Clara. "I agree," Clara said immediately, no hesitation. "I'll sign." My daughter, 28 years old and already wiser than I'd been at twice her age. Raymond pulled out the guardianship papers he'd prepared. Emergency temporary guardianship pending full court approval. He'd already contacted the social worker, already verified Grace's wishes. She'd told the hospice staff weeks ago that if anything happened, she wanted Leo with someone kind, not the system. My head throbbed from exhaustion. 3 hours of sleep after the midnight decision to report Julian. The dull ache behind my left temple made the fluorescent lights feel too bright. I pressed my fingers to the spot and reminded myself one crisis at a time. Leo first. Julian's consequences could wait. Clara signed the papers. Her signature was firm and clear, no doubt. Raymond gathered the documents. I'll file these this morning, he said. Given the circumstances and Grace's documented wishes, approval should be immediate. There's one more thing. He looked at me. The police complaint was filed at 8 this morning, he said. Detective Harris will contact Julian for questioning sometime today. I've also reached out to Dolores Evans. She's willing to provide a statement. The two timelines converging. Building a family while destroying my nephew's freedom. Saving one child while ensuring another faced consequences for trying to destroy vulnerable people. Thank you, I said. Raymond nodded. Then he stood and walked to the door, opened it. Leo sat in the hallway on another plastic chair. Colleen had brought him breakfast, but the tray sat untouched beside him. He looked up when Raymond appeared. Leo, Raymond said gently. Can you come in? Leo walked into the meeting room. He looked very small, standing there in his dinosaur shirt and jeans that were slightly too big. Someone from the hospice staff had brought him clean clothes. His mother's things were being packed up by volunteers. Raymond explained the guardianship arrangement in simple terms. Temporary custody with Arthur and Clara. A home instead of the orphanage. A family instead of the system. Leo listened carefully, nodded at the right places, didn't cry. When Raymond finished, Leo looked at me with those serious brown eyes. Can I bring my crayon box? He asked. Not, thank you. Not why are you doing this? Just the practical question of a 9-year-old making sure his one possession came along. Yes, I said. Leo nodded once satisfied, like we'd just negotiated the most important contract of his life. Friday morning, mid-December, and I was walking out of Crestview Rehabilitation 5 days ahead of schedule with a 9-year-old boy carrying a crayon box and Clara carrying discharge paperwork neither of us had expected to need. The doctors had cleared me early. Something about recovery progressing faster than anticipated. Something about a stable home environment being better for both patient and ward. I suspected they just wanted to get Leo settled before Christmas. Nurse Colleen met us at the front gate. She'd worked the night shift but stayed late to see us off. This boy has been sitting in our hallway for weeks, she said, looking at Leo with affection. I've never seen a child so patient. Leo stood beside me, holding his crayon box with both hands. The same battered tin box he'd been carrying since the first day I met him. His entire childhood reduced to 64 crayons, and the memory of a mother who'd loved him enough to teach him to wait quietly. Thank you for everything, I said to Colleen. She smiled. Then she crouched down to Leo's level. You take care of him, she said, nodding toward me. Leo nodded seriously, like she'd just given him the most important job in the world. We walked to Clara's car. The Tennessee morning was cold and bright, sunlight on frost-covered grass. My breath is visible in the December air. Everything looked sharper than it had inside the hospital walls. Clara drove. Leo sat in the back with his seatbelt fastened and his crayon box on his lap. I watched him in the side mirror. He was looking out the window at the passing landscape with the quiet attention of someone memorizing a route in case he needed to find his way back. After about 20 minutes, he leaned forward. Uncle, he said quietly, would you like me to teach you how to color? I have lots of colors. I turned to look at him, those serious brown eyes watching me carefully, offering the one thing he had to give. I can learn, I said. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. A real smile. Not the polite expression you give doctors, or the tight grimace you wear when your nephew tries to steal everything you own. An actual smile. Leo smiled back, small and tentative. Then he opened his crayon box and started coloring on a piece of paper Clara had given him. I watched the Tennessee landscape roll past. Trees bare against winter sky. Fields lying fallow waiting for spring. I thought about Julian, about the police investigation Raymond had filed, about the legal battle ahead. But the anger I'd expected wasn't there, just sadness and determination, and the quiet certainty that I'd made the right choice, even though it meant destroying Son's life to protect strangers I'd never met. 6 months passed. Leo started 3rd grade at the elementary school 3 blocks from my Nashville home. Clara moved to Tennessee permanently, took a job at Vanderbilt teaching engineering. We settled into something that looked almost like a normal family. I testified twice about Julian's document alterations. Once in February for the preliminary hearing, once in April for the grand jury. Raymond said the case was building slowly but solidly, multiple fraud victims coming forward, a pattern emerging that prosecutors loved. And then in June, my phone rang with a Florida area code I didn't recognize. Mr. Vance? A woman's voice, tired, careful. My name is Dolores Evans. I sat up straighter in my chair, the woman from the email. The one Julian's accomplice had mentioned. She has no proof. Ms. Evans, I said, I'm glad you called. I found your number through Raymond Maxwell, she said. He told me you might be willing to talk. Dolores Evans was 55, widowed 3 years. Father passed 2 weeks ago. Her voice carried the particular exhaustion of someone sorting a dead parent's belongings and finding secrets they'd carried alone. My father died in May, she said. Stroke. He was 81. I've been going through his things. Found a notebook in his desk drawer. She paused. I heard papers rustling. There's an entry from 2020, she said, written in his handwriting. Julian Vance, $47,000. Fraud impersonating Nashville postal worker to gain trust. $47,000. 2 years before Julian tried to steal from me. The pattern went back further than I'd thought. My father never told me, Dolores said. Her voice cracked slightly. He carried this alone, died with it. I think he was ashamed. I thought about my own handwritten note warning me about Julian Vance, about sitting with Leo in that dark hallway at midnight, about making the choice to report Julian not for myself, but to stop the next victim. Every victim had a Leo, a child or family member who inherited the shame alongside the loss, who found the secrets after death and had to carry them forward, who lived with the knowledge that someone they loved had been destroyed and hadn't trusted them enough to ask for help. I have proof of Julian, I said. Documentation, emails, testimony from multiple victims. I've given everything to police. Would you like to work with me? Yes, she said immediately. I want to help. She stopped, collected herself. Mr. Vance, my father never told me because he was ashamed. That killed me more than $47,000 ever could. The words hit like a physical blow. I looked out my window. Leo sat on the front porch, drawing crayon box open beside him, tongue between his teeth, in concentration. Clara had taught him to draw buildings. Now he was designing elaborate structures with careful attention to perspective and detail. Dolores Evans said her father's shame had killed her worse than the money ever could. I understood something I hadn't before. Julian didn't just steal money. He stole dignity from people who'd worked their whole lives to keep it. He stole trust between parents and children. He left behind secrets that poisoned families, even after death. This wasn't about protecting assets anymore. It was about stopping the theft of something more valuable than property or insurance policies. It was about preserving what remained of human dignity. In a world where predators calculated exactly how much shame a victim would carry rather than speak. The call came on a Tuesday morning in late September while Leo sat at the kitchen table coloring a picture of our house. Detective Harris from Nashville PD had the clipped professional tone of someone who'd made 100 arrest notifications and knew to deliver facts without editorial. Mr. Vance, he said, we arrested Julian Vance this morning in Atlantic City. He was staying at a casino hotel under an assumed name. I sat down at the table across from Leo. He looked up from his drawing. Crayon paused mid-stroke. What did the investigation find? I asked. 7 victims we can fully verify, Detective Harris replied. Total losses are approximately $380,000. Your hospital testimony, the synced iPad emails, your daughter's voicemail evidence, and Ms. Evans's notebook built an airtight foundation for the prosecutor. Brown eyes. I hung up and looked at Clara. 7 families. Detective Harris had explained that Julian targeted seniors by using my 35 years of unblemished service at the post office to break down their defenses, turning the trust I spent a lifetime building into a weapon against the vulnerable. Leo was watching me from across the kitchen table with his serious brown eyes. Is everything okay? He asked. Everything's okay, I said, trying to steady my voice. Clara sat down beside us in silence as Leo went back to coloring his drawing of our house, red roof, blue door, yellow windows. A child's version of home drawn by someone who'd never had one until we brought him here. Raymond called later that afternoon with the legal updates. The prosecutors were confident. The paper trail on the synced family email and the statements from Dolores Evans left Julian with no defense. The trust I built over 3 decades in Nashville was now the very thing that would ensure my son faced real justice. 9 months passed between Julian's arrest and trial. Depositions and evidence review and plea negotiations that went nowhere because Julian maintained his innocence despite overwhelming proof. And then July arrived with the courtroom summons I'd been dreading since September. Nashville County Courthouse, Thursday morning, July 2025. Judge Morrison was late 60s with silver hair and reading glasses on a chain, the kind of judge who'd heard every excuse and believed none of them. I sat in the witness box and looked across the courtroom at Julian. He wore a charcoal gray suit. His hair was longer than I remembered. His face held no expression at all. The prosecutor asked me to recount what happened. I told the truth, every detail. The altered documents with crossed out names, the text messages pressuring me to sign, Dr. Owens's statement that I lacked capacity, the handwritten note I'd written to myself before surgery, Leo's warning delivered twice because a 9-year-old boy knew something was wrong, even when adults missed it. Julian never looked at me while I spoke, just stared straight ahead at some point on the wall behind the judge. I remembered Julian at 8 years old building model trains in the basement, tongue between his teeth in concentration just like Leo when he colored. At 16, graduating top of his class. At 25, getting his first big promotion. Smart and ambitious and full of potential. I tried to reconcile those memories with the man in the charcoal suit who wouldn't meet his father's eyes, who'd spent years systematically destroying vulnerable people and stealing their dignity along with their money. The prosecutor asked about the email to RL.Associates. My daughter found it on my iPad, I said. Julian had sent it from the family email account describing the plan to steal approximately $1.43 million in assets. He mentioned another victim, Dolores Evans, who had no proof. Dolores sat in the gallery behind the prosecutor's table. She'd flown in from Florida to hear the verdict. 7 other victim families filled the benches. Clara sat in the front row. She'd taken the day off work, held my jacket while I testified, waited to drive me home. The prosecutor asked how I discovered the fraud attempt. A 9-year-old boy told me something was wrong. I said, he warned me twice. Once about a man who'd hurt his mother. Once by making me promise to read something I'd written to myself. That child saved everything I owned. Julian's jaw tightened, the only reaction he showed during the entire testimony. The trial lasted 3 days. Witnesses and evidence and expert testimony about elder financial abuse. On Friday afternoon, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all counts. Judge Morrison looked at Julian over his reading glasses. Julian Vance, he said, you exploited your father's reputation to defraud 7 individuals of substantial assets during their most vulnerable years. You are hereby sentenced to 6 years in state prison. 6 years. I sat in the gallery and watched the bailiff lead Julian away in handcuffs. He still didn't look at me, just walked through the side door with his head up and his face blank. I wiped tears I hadn't known I was crying. Clara drove me home. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? I pulled into the driveway after the longest day of my life, and Leo was standing at the front door waiting. Are you okay? He asked. 9 years old when I met him. 10 now. Asking if I was okay after I'd just testified against my own son and watched him sentenced to 6 years in prison. I'm fine, I said. Come inside, we'll have dinner. Leo took my hand walking through the door. His palm was warm, his grip was steady, a child anchoring his guardian through justice's pain. That night we had dinner like nothing had happened. Leo ate his pasta and told me about the book he was reading. Clara called to check on us. We were okay. 3 months later, the envelope arrived on a Tuesday in October. Tennessee Department of Corrections return address. Julian's prison number stamped below his name. 4 handwritten pages inside that I almost didn't open. Leo was at school. Clara was at work. I sat alone at the kitchen table with the envelope in my hands. I opened it. The handwriting was Julian's. Neat. Controlled. The same handwriting that had altered legal documents while I recovered from brain surgery. The first page started with blame. Dad, you never really believed me. Even when I tried to explain, you'd already decided I was guilty. You chose to believe a child you'd known for 5 days over your own son. Do you know what that feels like? I set the page down, picked up the second. I know the evidence looked bad. I know what the prosecutor said. But you didn't even try to understand my side. You just gave up on me. Let them take me away. Testified against me like I was a stranger. The words were designed to create guilt, to make me question my choices, to suggest that if I'd just believed him, trusted him, supported him, everything would have been different. I'd heard this pattern before. Read it in victim statements during the trial. Julian told 7 elderly people almost identical stories. blamed their suspicion when evidence emerged, made them feel guilty for not trusting him, used their desire to believe in his innocence as a weapon against their better judgment. The manipulation was so clear now, so obvious. How had I missed it for so long? The third page shifted to apology. I know I was wrong. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. I hurt you and Clara and people who trusted me. I stole from you when you were vulnerable. I used your reputation to hurt strangers. I know all of this. Performative acknowledgement. Admission designed to demonstrate growth and self-awareness. The setup for what would come next. I turned to the fourth page. The public defender they gave me didn't even try. He told me to take a plea deal when I was innocent. The trial was a joke. I need a real lawyer who can file a proper appeal. I've been researching there are grounds, constitutional issues with the search, evidentiary problems. There it was. I need $2,000 to hire a lawyer who can review the case properly. I know it's a lot to ask. I know I have no right. But Dad, I'm asking anyway. Not as your son, as someone who made terrible mistakes and is trying to fix them. I remember Julian at 12 years old asking for money to invest in a friend's lawn mowing business, promising he'd pay it back with interest. The money never came back. The friend's family never saw the equipment Julian claimed to buy. But Julian explained it away so convincingly. I'd believed him, wanted to believe him, chose to believe him because doubt felt like betrayal. I'd enabled him for decades, called it love, called it support, called it giving my son the benefit of the doubt. What I'd really been doing was teaching him that consequences were negotiable if you told your story well enough. I folded the letter carefully, all 4 pages back in order, slid them into the envelope. Then I walked to my bedroom and opened the drawer in my nightstand. Inside was the handwritten note I'd written to myself before brain surgery. The warning I'd left for my future self, because some part of me had already known the truth about Julian. I placed Julian's letter in the drawer beside my own note. 2 pieces of paper. 2 warnings. 2 versions of the same truth written years apart. Enabling is love's cruelest disguise. It wears the face of mercy while feeding the thing that destroys. The hardest part of truly loving someone is knowing when your help becomes their poison. I'd given Julian money before, believed his explanations, defended him to people who'd questioned his stories. Every time I'd told myself I was being a good father, what I'd actually been doing was teaching him that I would always rescue him, that there were no real consequences. That manipulation worked if you just told the story right. Marlo had known. Before she died, she'd told me, learn to say no to Julian, not because you don't love him, but because you do. I'd finally learned I wasn't going to send the money, wasn't going to reply to the letter, not from anger or revenge or punishment. From love, real love, the kind that lets someone face consequences without rescue. The kind that says, I care about you enough to let you experience the full weight of your choices. Julian needed to sit in that prison cell and understand that manipulation didn't work anymore, that blame shifting didn't create obligation, that performative apologies didn't erase accountability. He needed to learn that some actions have costs that fathers can't pay. I closed the drawer. From the living room, I heard Leo come home from school, the front door opening, his backpack dropping in the hallway, his footsteps moving to the couch, then the soft whisper of pages turning. He was reading the library book about architects he'd checked out last week, learning about people who built things instead of destroying them. I stood in my bedroom doorway and listened to that sound. Paper on paper. A child reading peacefully in my house. That sound steady and quiet and full of future was the thing Julian's $2,000 could never buy. I'd closed the drawer on Julian's letter and my own handwritten warning. 2 fathers, 2 sons, 2 different endings. One had asked for money to escape consequences. One had asked if I was okay after watching those consequences arrive. I walked into the living room. Leo looked up from his book. Want to see what I'm learning? He asked. Yes, I said. Show me. He made room on the couch. I sat beside him. He showed me drawings of buildings, explained load-bearing walls and foundation principles. A 10-year-old boy teaching his guardian about how to build things that last. Julian's letter stayed in the drawer, unanswered. And in the living room, Leo turned another page. Leo taught me about load-bearing walls that afternoon, how buildings need the right foundation or everything collapses. He didn't know he was teaching me about more than architecture. The week after Julian's sentencing, I sat in Raymond's law office, surrounded by documents that would rebuild what my son had tried to destroy. New will, trust amendments, adoption paperwork. I understood something I hadn't. Before, protection isn't just stopping bad things, it's building fortresses around good ones. Raymond spread the papers across his desk. The new will was thick, detailed, nothing like the simple document I'd signed years ago when I thought family meant blood and blood meant loyalty. This completely removes Julian from your estate, Raymond said. He looked at me over his reading glasses. After Leo's adoption completes, everything divides between Clara and Leo, 50-50. Julian receives nothing. That's what I want, I said. Clara sat beside me. She'd taken the afternoon off work to be here. You're sure? She asked quietly. I thought about Julian's letter from prison, the manipulation disguised as apology, the request for money wrapped in blame, the pattern I'd enabled for decades by calling rescue love. I'm sure, I said. Raymond pulled out another document. The Percy Priest lakefront property requires special attention, he said. I'm recommending a 3-signature trust. Any transaction, sale, mortgage transfer requires unanimous written consent from all 3 trustees. Who are the trustees? I asked. You, Clara, and myself, Raymond said. No one can touch this property without all 3 of us agreeing. It's the strongest protection available. I looked at Clara. She nodded. Do it, I said. Raymond slid the documents toward me. I picked up his pen, the same kind of pen Julian had used to alter documents while I recovered from brain surgery, but this time I was signing the right papers. I signed my name slowly, carefully. Each letter is deliberate. Clara signed next. Her signature was firm, more certain than the handwritten note I'd left myself before surgery. We'd both learned which documents deserved our names. Raymond witnessed and notarized, made it official, made it permanent. You did the right thing, Raymond said, looking at me over his glasses. Few people would have the courage to do this to their own child. It's not courage, I said. It's something Marla wanted me to do for a long time. My wife knew. Before she died, she'd tried to tell me. Learn to say no to Julian, not because you don't love him, but because you do. I'd finally learned. The legal process moved swiftly after the criminal indictment. Through coordinated evaluations and emergency family court, fast-tracking, we secured a final court date to secure what mattered most. August 2024, Nashville Family Court. Judge Whitmore was early 60s with kind eyes and reading glasses. The kind of family court judge who'd overseen 1,000 adoptions and still smiled at everyone. Leo sat beside me at the plaintiff's table. He was 12 now, taller. His voice had started changing, but he still asked permission before taking cookies and still kept his crayon box on the shelf in his bedroom. Clara sat on my other side. Raymond sat behind us with the paperwork that had taken 17 months to complete. Judge Whitmore reviewed the final documents, read through the home study report, the character references, the psychological evaluations that said what we already knew: this was a good placement, a child thriving, a family already complete in everything except legal status. Mr. Vance, Judge Whitmore said, do you understand that adoption creates a permanent legal relationship, that Leo will have the same rights and responsibilities as any biological child? I understand, I said, and you're prepared to accept those responsibilities. I looked at Leo, at this boy who'd sat in hospital hallways, warning me about danger when he could have stayed silent. Who'd asked if I was okay after I testified against my own son, who taught me about building things that last? I am, I said. Judge Whitmore signed the order. Congratulations, she said, smiling. Leo Arthur Vance, welcome to your family. Leo picked up the paper, read his new name aloud slowly. Leo Arthur Vance? He looked up at me, those serious brown eyes that had seen too much, too young, but had never lost their capacity for trust. Uncle, he started, then stopped. I mean, Dad, do you see my name has your name in the middle? I see, I said. My throat was tight, my eyes were wet. Mom will like this name, Leo said quietly. Grace Cooper. A woman I'd never met who died alone in a hospital room while I slept 3 doors down. I never got to tell her that her son saved my life twice. Once by telling the truth about Julian when he had no reason to. Once by giving me a reason to keep living when everything else was ashes. Grace had taught Leo something I'd failed to teach Julian: how to distinguish truly good people from those just pretending. How to tell the truth even when lying would be easier. How to warn someone about danger even when staying silent would be safer. Leo had figured it out. When it mattered most, he'd known the difference. Your mom raised you right, I said. Leo nodded. Then he stood and hugged me. I held Leo Arthur Vance, 12 years old, straight A student child, who still colored pictures of our house with careful attention to detail and thought about the two sons in my life. Julian was blood, 4 decades of shared DNA and shared history and shared last name. Leo was choice, 3 years of shared trust and shared meals and shared future. Grace Cooper died before I could thank her, but she'd left behind the best son I ever knew. She'd taught him everything that mattered, and when the moment came to choose between a man who claimed authority and a boy who offered truth, Leo had made the right choice. Julian was my son by birth, Leo was my son by decision. And standing in that family court with my arms around a child who'd lost everything and chose to trust me anyway, I understood which kind of father I wanted to be. Clara took a picture, Leo and me, father and son. Family? Not the family I was born into. The family I built. That photograph hung on our wall. Clara had it framed. Father and son. Family built instead of inherited. I met Dolores Evans in person for the first time on a Thursday afternoon in August, a year after Julian's trial. Nashville Senior Center. Two people who'd only known each other through phone calls about the man who destroyed both our families, finally sitting across a table drinking bad coffee and talking about what comes after justice. Dolores was petite, 55, with a slow Tennessee accent that made every word sound considered. Clara sat with us, the three of us in folding chairs, around a plastic table, in a room that smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. I keep thinking about my father, Dolores said, how he kept silent because he was ashamed, how that silence cost him 2 years of suffering alone. She stirred sugar into her coffee. Her hands were steady, but her voice wasn't. The money, $47,000, that hurt, but the shame hurt worse. He died carrying that secret. Died thinking he'd failed me by being stupid enough to trust Julian. He wasn't stupid, I said. Julian was skilled. I know that now, Dolores said. But my father didn't. And because he stayed silent, Julian found you, and after you, who knows how many others. Clara leaned forward. What do you want to do about it? She asked. Dolores looked at both of us. What I want is for no one else to have to be ashamed and silent like my father was, she said. I want people to know these stories, to recognize the patterns, to understand that being targeted doesn't mean you failed. It means a predator saw vulnerability and chose to exploit it. You want to create something, I said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Dolores said. I do, the three of us, something that helps people before they become victims. That tells them it's not their fault. That shows them the warning signs. Clara was already thinking logistics. I could see it in her face. The engineer's mind organizing components into systems. Education, Clara said. Free legal advice. Support groups, monthly sessions at senior centers and hospitals. Exactly, Dolores said. She looked at me. Arthur, would you be willing to tell your story publicly? To other seniors, to families? I thought about the question. About standing in front of strangers and admitting that my own son had tried to steal everything I owned, that I'd been vulnerable and confused, and nearly signed documents that would have destroyed my life. Then I thought about last night. Leo asking a question at dinner. Dad, where's your box of crayons? I'd bought myself a crayon box, 64 colors, the same kind Leo kept on his shelf. We colored together some evenings. He taught me about staying inside the lines, about choosing colors that complemented each other, about patience. A 62-year-old man learning from an 11-year-old boy how to create something beautiful from blank paper. Yes, I told Dolores, I'll tell my story. 13 months passed between that coffee and our first Grace and Leo network session, filing nonprofit paperwork and recruiting volunteers and designing curriculum. Clara handled logistics while Dolores built contact lists, and I learned how to tell my story without crying. September 2025, Nashville Senior Center, our first public session. 30 seniors filled the room, some in wheelchairs, some with walkers, all of them vulnerable in ways that made them targets. I spoke first, told them about waking up after brain surgery not knowing my name, about Julian's documents, about a 9-year-old boy who saved me by telling the truth. Clara spoke second, explained the legal mechanisms of financial elder abuse, the warning signs, the documentation strategies, the free legal resources we'd arranged. Dolores spoke third, read from her father's notebook, the entry about Julian, the shame her father had carried alone, the silence that enabled more harm. Then Leo stood up. He was 11 years old, stood maybe 4'9", wore a button-up shirt Claire had ironed that morning. carried himself with the seriousness of someone who'd learned early that truth matters more than comfort. I was 9, Leo said to the room. My mom was dying in the hospital. I saw my mom's friend, a man named Julian, put his finger over her name on a paper, covering letters, making it look different. That's when I knew something was wrong. The room was completely silent. I told Mr. Vance my dad now twice, because truth is more important than being polite. My mom taught me that. I watched Leo speak to 30 seniors about recognizing fraud, an 11-year-old teaching 70-year-olds, and I understood something I hadn't before. Grace Cooper didn't just save my assets. She saved her son's ability to save others by teaching him that truth matters, that silence protects predators, that speaking up even when scary is how you protect people you'll never meet. Leo's lesson became the most memorable part of every session we held. The story of a child recognizing fraud through careful observation. The image of a finger covering letters on paper. After that first session ended, people approached us with questions, with their own stories, with documentation they'd been too ashamed to show anyone. And then Margaret Finch walked up to me. She was 78 with careful silver curls and trembling hands. The kind of woman who'd spent a lifetime being polite and was just now learning that politeness to predators is permission. Mr. Vance, she said quietly, my son is doing exactly what you described with my house. He says he's helping me avoid taxes, but when I ask questions, he gets angry. I pulled out a chair, sat down across from her. Tell me everything, I said. Margaret talked for 20 minutes. I heard Grace's voice in her shame, saw Dolores's father in her silence, recognized Julian's tactics in her son's manipulation. The same pattern, different family, same destruction. Can you help? She asked. Yes, I said. We can help. And sitting there listening to a 78-year-old woman describe her son's betrayal, I understood something fundamental. This was the real reason I survived that accident. Lost my memory, nearly lost everything, fought my own child in court. Not to win, to be here, for this moment. For Margaret Finch and every person like her who needed someone to say, you're not stupid, you're targeted. You're not alone, you're heard. This isn't your fault, it's a crime. Grace and Leo Network helped 19 families that first year. 19 Margaret Finches who walked into our sessions carrying shame and walked out carrying hope. 19 families who didn't become statistics. My son destroyed 7 families. My adopted son helped me save 19. The math worked out better than I'd hoped. We arrived at Percy Priest on a Saturday in late August, and the lake was the color of hammered copper in afternoon light. Leo was out of the car before Clara cut the engine. He walked straight to the shoreline, not running, not hesitating, just moving toward the water the way people move toward something they've been waiting for without knowing it. He stood at the edge and looked out for a long time without speaking. Claire and I stayed on the porch steps. Neither of us said anything. There are moments that don't need commentary. Leo was 12 now. Taller every month, his voice still catching between registers, his face settling into whatever it would permanently become. But the quality of attention was unchanged, that particular stillness of someone who pays full notice to what's in front of him before deciding what to say about it. He turned around. Dad, he said, not Uncle. He'd made that shift in March and never reversed it the way water doesn't flow back once it finds its channel. Our house is really something. Our house. Clara caught my eye briefly and looked away. Some moments are too full to acknowledge directly. We ate dinner on the porch as the sun descended behind the western hill and the lake moved through its evening colors, copper deepening to rose, then to the flat dark mirror that arrives after the last light gives up. Clara had brought sandwiches and lemonade mixed sweeter than sour, which was how Leo preferred it. She'd remembered without being reminded. That habit of hers, absorbing small preferences without remarking on them, was something I'd watched develop over 3 years. She knew which library books Leo reread, how long he needed to decompress after school before he could engage with anyone. She'd learned all of it quietly and acted on none of it with announcement. After dinner, Leo took his sketchbook to the dock. Clara and I watched him settle cross-legged at the far end and open to a blank page. Clara poured more lemonade. Do you think about him? She asked. No subject needed. Every day, I said, differently than before, but every day. I keep revisiting the timeline, she said, looking for where I could have seen it earlier. There isn't one clean moment, I said. Julian built everything across years. He knew exactly how long to wait between requests, exactly how much warmth to maintain, exactly which explanations would satisfy someone who wanted to believe him. Clara looked at Leo on the dock. Leo didn't calculate, she said. Didn't manage how he came across, just saw something wrong and described it plainly. He had nothing to protect by lying, I said. She turned toward me. That's part of it. But he was 9 years old with a dying mother. No one would have blamed him for staying focused entirely on his own situation. He chose to look sideways at something that wasn't his problem. And then he spoke. From the dock, the soft, regular sound of pencil on paper. Grace never met me, I said. She was 3 doors down for days, and I never once walked through that door. She died before I could say anything. She wouldn't have wanted thanks, Clara said. She'd have wanted to know Leo was okay. I know. We sat with that for a while. After Clara went inside, I walked down to the dock and sat beside Leo at the end. He showed me his sketchbook without being asked. The drawing was the house viewed from the water porch, steps the hillside rising behind proportions carefully observed. He'd added things that weren't there, a bird on the railing, branches moved by wind, and at the shoreline's edge, a small figure standing alone, looking out. Who's that? I asked. Mom, Leo said. I put her in places she would have liked. He said it the way you state a weather fact, present, not dramatized. He'd learned to carry his mother the way you carry necessary weight, acknowledged, not concealed, not displayed. She would have liked this, I said. Yeah? He closed the sketchbook, looked at the dark water. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. He considered the phrasing first. The note you wrote yourself before the surgery, the one about Julian, did part of you already know? Before you went under? I thought about it honestly rather than quickly. Some part of me knew something was wrong, I said. Had known for longer than I admitted, but I kept finding reasons not to act on it. The note was the moment the knowing broke through before I could stop it. Leo nodded. My mom said there's a difference between not knowing and deciding not to look, he said. She said most people already know. They just don't want to be the one who says it. She was right. She was right about most things. He paused. She taught me what to watch for with papers. She didn't know she was teaching me for your situation specifically, but she was. Years before we met, I said. She was protecting me before she knew I needed it. Leo looked at the water. One star was visible, its reflection barely moving on the still surface. I like that, he said finally, that she was already helping you. I took the folded note from my jacket pocket. Leo recognized it without being told what it was. I'm going to keep it here now, I said. We walked back up the dock together. Inside, on the bookshelf beside Marlowe's photograph, sat a small wooden box Claire had found at an estate sale and placed there months ago without explanation. I'd understood immediately what it was for. I opened it, set the note inside, closed the lid. Leo studied the photograph of Marlowe. She looks like she told good jokes, he said. She was the sharpest person I ever knew, I said, and the most willing to say what no one else would. I spent 30 years thinking she was being hard on me. She was just being honest. Leo looked at me. That's what the network does, he said. Right? It's honest for people who don't have anyone saying the hard thing yet. I looked at my son, 12 years old, standing in a house that had almost been taken, beside a photograph of a woman who'd spent 3 decades telling me exactly what Leo had told me in 30 seconds. That's exactly what it does, I said. Grace and Leo Network had run sessions across 11 Nashville area facilities by that August. 83 families, folding chairs and bad coffee, and people who arrived carrying shame they hadn't named yet. The structure never changed. I spoke first. Room 14B, the documents, the handwritten note in the nightstand drawer, the notary who recognized the name and paused long enough for everything to shift. Clara explained the legal mechanics, what a financial power of attorney actually authorizes, how quitclaim deed language functions, which phrases signal a transaction designed to obscure rather than inform. Then Leo stood up, 12 years old, addressing rooms full of people 5 and 6 times his age. He spoke without performance or embellishment. He described one specific thing, a man placing his thumb over the lower portion of a legal document while encouraging someone else to sign above it. That image landed differently than any legal explanation could. Abstract warnings about elder fraud don't stick. A thumb hiding words does. Every session, somewhere in the room, at least one person went still with recognition. Margaret Finch at session 1. A retired school teacher at session 44 who'd been reassuring himself for months that his daughter's requests were reasonable. A woman named Ruth at session 61 who left mid-session to make a phone call and stopped a property transfer that would have cost her a house she'd owned for 38 years. Ruth came back to session 83 to tell us. She brought cookies and wouldn't hear of anyone refusing them. Leo didn't track outcomes. He came to the sessions, said what he'd seen, and went home to his homework. He didn't need the story centered on himself. He needed it to reach the right people. That was Grace's work. She gave him the understanding that truth isn't performance, it's function. After Leo went to bed, I stayed on the porch alone. The lake was invisible in the dark, but audible small movements. Water touching the bank, the low, continuous sound of something patient doing what it always did, regardless of who was watching. I sat with the weight of 3 years. Room 14B in December. Cotton in my skull and a blank space where the last 5 minutes should have been. A boy in the hallway asking if my son was good, not knowing he was asking the precise question I'd been avoiding for years. A note in my own handwriting that my past self had written as a warning to my future self, because some part of me had already understood what I wouldn't consciously admit. Julian's face when the calculation finally ran out of places to hide, and underneath everything constant as the lake, a 9-year-old boy choosing to look sideways when his entire life was collapsing directly in front of him. Grace Cooper answered the question her son was reading aloud through that hospital wall. What is real? She answered it not with philosophy, but with everything she taught him before she left. Real is a thumb covering words someone isn't supposed to read. Real is the difference between love that sees you and attention that uses you. Real is choosing to speak when silence is easier, and no one would blame you for it. What she built was exactly the instrument the moment required. That distinction cost her everything. It returned mine. The wooden box sat on the shelf inside with Marlowe's photograph beside it. The lake moved without urgency in the dark. Leo slept 3 rooms away, in a house that carried his name in its deed. I had finally learned to listen, not through wisdom, not through courage, but because someone with nothing to gain had chosen to tell me the truth when saying nothing would have cost him less. Family is not the people who share your name. Family is the people willing to say the hard thing when silence is easier. They don't announce themselves. They show up, they tell the truth, they stay. That's all, that's everything. And to you listening to my story, remember, this family isn't always who you're born to. For decades, I made the mistake of believing blood meant loyalty. I enabled Julian because I thought protecting your child meant never saying no. I watched the warning signs and told myself I was being unfair. I chose blindness over truth because truth was harder to face. Don't make that mistake. Don't confuse enabling with love. Don't close your eyes to protect someone who's hurting others. Here's what I learned. Lying in that hospital bed when you can't trust your own memory, you have to trust the people who have nothing to gain from lying to you. Leo was 9 years old. He gained nothing from warning me, but he told the truth anyway because his mother taught him that truth matters more than comfort. I believe God put that child in my path for a reason, not just to save my assets, but to teach me what real family means. It's not blood, it's truth-telling. It's choosing to speak up even when silence is easier. If you've experienced something similar, family betrayal, elder fraud, or someone who saved you by telling a hard truth, leave a comment below. Your story might help someone else recognize the warning signs. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories about standing up for what's right, subscribe to Revenge Dad. Thank you for staying until the very end. Some details in this story have been adjusted for storytelling purposes, but the core message about trust and family is real. Take care.